This is a sermon about loyalty. From the Latin legalis, having to do with legality and the law, and carrying the particular sense of steadfast allegiance to a person or an institution, or most poignantly, to the state. The first thing, though, that I want to say about loyalty this morning is that loyalty is a precarious word. While loyal in its classic sense means firm and constant in support, it can be and has often been distorted for other purposes. Governments have demanded unquestioned loyalty of their citizens, rulers of their subjects, and yes, the church of their members, in the church's case, complete with threats of humiliation, excommunication, even the eternal wrath of God. Now, historically, Baptists, us, perhaps more than any other Protestant group in America, have bucked the mandate to be loyal to the powers that be, wherever they be. We are inheritors of a legacy of resistance to all claims of loyalty, and I quote, above those from our mission statement, above those which we owe to God. Indeed, we at Cumberland have come a long way from that misappropriation of loyalty tied to narrow conformity, orthodoxy, even the shaming of victims. Instead, we have long been choosing loyalty to the unconditional love of God for each and for all, loyalty toward those seeking spirits among us, toward those who feel vulnerable and outcast, and loyalty to the idea that every one of us, every one of anyone, is a child of God worthy of love and affirmation. And so, yes, there are some very good and positive things we can say this morning about loyalty. Last Sunday, I mentioned growing up in central Illinois. I mentioned values I learned there that have stayed with me. Among these are the loyalty of family friends, especially those of my childhood at First Baptist Church of Bloomington, Illinois. Also, Bobby McManaman's church. I was hoping she could be here to verify this, but I'm thinking of faithful people like her parents, Chuck and Carolyn McGuire. Her parents and my father have outlived almost everybody in their worlds, have outlived their peers. But when I mention names of dear friends to my dad, bad as his memory is, I love to watch him animate in recognition. His spirit of deep and loyal recognition is intact. It is palpable. And I love that. When I moved to Indiana and eventually started pastoring churches, I likewise became aware of a phenomenon here that at least used to be true, and maybe this will resonate with some of you, that of loyalty and steadfastness in business. And it went kind of like this, that Hoosiers have been kind of traditionally slower than most to warm up to a new family doctor, say, or a mechanic, or a plumber, or a pastor in my case, pick a profession. But once you had a Hoosier, had gained their trust, they were loyal to a fault. Now, I don't know just to what extent that was ever really true, but I do kind of doubt whether such a thing as this is true much of anywhere now. Just what is the state of loyalty today? Or, more to the point really, what is the nature of the loyalty that we should seek? Now, this is a very human question. It is also a very Christian question. To what or whom are you loyal now? If this timeless virtue of loyalty holds any power in this strange, disorienting moment of America, then just where is it to be directed? There are biblical faith perspectives on this question, which I will get to. But first, why is it that I think this is a big enough concern today to base a sermon around it? Glad you asked. The answer is, my answer is, because any semblance of values-based loyalty seems to me, anyway, to be rapidly disintegrating before our eyes. In this nation, loyalty is a reverence for and a willing adherence to the rule of law. Our laws-based order requires not only the founders' brilliant structure of checks and balances between the branches, but a loyalty, a fidelity, an allegiance, really, to that separation and the due process that regulates it. Leaders have to be willing to abide by it and to hold one another accountable to it. This will seems to be rapidly failing. Now, this is not a new trend. It's been a slow-growing thing, and yet it suddenly seems greatly accelerating. We see it in DOJ's attempt to take over the U.S. government agencies with no authoritative vetting role, gaining access to all your private information, access to the U.S. Treasury, which makes payments of roughly $6 trillion a year. We see it in the executive's bid to assume the role of Congress, a separate branch, in order to drastically slash the size of government and the number of government employees, dictating what programs it deems worthwhile. We see it as millions of government employees are being subjected to an end run around their job security, some of them in this room this morning, who are having leveled against them often aspersions of everything from laziness to inefficiency and corruption, characterizations that are not true. Government employees work hard to find and secure their jobs. They worked hard. They have made sacrifices to keep them. They have made moves, took out mortgages, started families. Now there is a blanket push to get them to resign across agencies in an untested bid to drastically shrink the safety net. Where is the loyalty of the government towards its people in that? Do you know, though, one thing some of these employees are reportedly clinging to? Their cherished oath of office to protect the United States Constitution. This is their North Star, their loyalty test, and it is the bedrock of true fidelity to the meaning of America. And we see it, as I spoke about last week, in the pending collapse of the USAID, our remarkable U.S. Foreign Aid and Development Agency, which has done so much to help so many while strengthening our foreign policy and stature around the globe. Now, a wholesale demolition of that agency is underway. Its many missions shut down, the critical life-giving work they do shuttered, and its thousands of direct hire personnel placed on administrative leave globally. USAID, it just must be said, and despite what you may hear, is one of the greatest humanitarian powers in the world. It protects millions from disease and hunger. And the business community in the U.S. is pro-USAID, despite what you may hear, because it is so successfully partnering with business to fund global development. Now its disaster assistance teams are canceled. Now its anti-polio eradication program is canceled. Now funding for LGBTQ programs in places like Uganda, which holds the strictest anti-LGBTQ laws in the world, including the death penalty just for being gay, canceled. And right here at home, so many rural Americans are or may soon be without federally qualified health centers, as half of these have lost their federal grants, causing some to stop services and possibly to close. Now, surely there have always been those who have relished the idea of taking their own cudgel to programs they don't believe help them. And these agencies are far from perfect. Every institution is, every agency is, obviously. But this changes nothing regarding the bipartisan consensus here in America that has held for decades. What consensus? That our government should regulate business, provide a basic social safety net, promote infrastructure, protect civil rights, that our government should protect every American's access to things like education, health care, transportation, communication, and employment. This has been the consensus about America's promise to us all that anyone, not just the fortunate by birth, could work hard and rise to prosperity. And this shared notion, put into practice, has raised the prospects of millions upon millions of Americans. And America's leaders were steadfast in their belief in it. They didn't all see it the same. They weren't all on the same page with all of it, but they were loyal to the notion nonetheless. This was the meaning of the loyalty to be carried out by those who were entrusted with the power to govern by us, by the people. This was the loyalty test they acknowledged and endorsed. So where's the meaning of loyalty, the virtue of loyalty, in the face of such things, in the betrayal of such things? For all of this raises the question of loyalty and what it means at this moment. We're being told that loyalty, even fealty to a person, is the norm. We're being told that now loyalty has one directive: to please and not displease a single person, for to do so will unleash the full weight of government power down upon us. There is a name for this kind of leadership arrangement. It is not democracy. There's a name for this way to serve the people. It is not loyalty. What, though, does our faith say about these things? What does loyalty look like in the context of faith? Our loyalty as faith people derives from and is inspired by three distinct but related truths. First, the gospel of God's love for us and for the entire world. Second, our love for one another. And third, our self-love, by which I mean our personal integrity, especially in our dealings toward others, for we can't love ourselves when we act in ways that are not integral, that do not demonstrate integrity. You've heard all this all your life. In Jesus' own words, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, you might not have noticed, but these three dimensions of loyalty also mirror well the key verse of this morning's scripture that I read from 1 Peter. Hear it again. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. And this strikes me, at least, as a pretty good setup for civil service in this nation, for any level of leadership in this nation. If you receive the loyalty of the people who willingly entrust you with power, here is the loyalty you are to offer back. Time, though, for just a little more unpacking. This passage from the epistle called 1 Peter was first addressed to Christians in Asia Minor around the year 90 CE, or 90 AD if you prefer. There's much we don't know for sure about these churches, but we do know that as a group they were under duress, scorned, sanctioned, in some cases even persecuted by the wider community. And that in this letter's overriding intent, there was the idea of reassuring and bolstering the faith of its members through hard times. What this meant in practical terms was not obvious. Christians and citizens of that realm would have looked around and felt rather powerless, kind of like some of us feel. But 1 Peter nevertheless asked of its hearers a very high level of loyalty. First to the gospel, then by extension to the gospel's norms of loyalty toward others. Most especially, the people of these churches were called to live lives of extreme hospitality, to be, above all, stewards, and I quote, stewards of God's grace. And here is the point, laid out here in this current climate of hostility and uncertainty. We followers of Jesus' way must work even harder, even more intentionally in our bid to remain loyal and true to the way of the gospel. And this includes the political realm, where gospel is always lived out. So then, in the midst of all that's going on, Where does our loyalty lie? In our setting, surely, it lies in the promise of democracy, with the democratic process, with an insistence on democratic checks and balances and divided government. It lies with civil power and our willingness to wield it. It means our protection of the most vulnerable citizens and non-citizens. And it relies and insists on our love of and solidarity with one another. It asks much of us, especially in times such as these. There's a story about St. Lawrence, a deacon in ancient Rome. In it, the Roman emperor demanded the Christian church turn over all of its riches. But St. Lawrence responded instead by selling the church's possessions and giving all the money to the poor. When the emperor finally confronted him and demanded the riches, Lawrence pointed to the hungry, pointed to the poor, and the naked, and the stranger in the land, and the most vulnerable. Then he declared to the emperor, "These are the treasures of the church." And for that, he was martyred. I don't know. I may be paying small prices right now for my words. Striving to make our words and deeds loyal to our beliefs, though, seems to me to be a requirement of any authentic faith. No less should be required of any pastor. What price will you pay to safeguard this most remarkable democratic way of life founded on the rule of law and nothing less? What price to remain loyal to the people of God anywhere and everywhere whom we are called to care for and to serve? What price to remain loyal to our most cherished values? The price of this kind of loyalty is going up right now in America. Going up, yes, right along with the price of eggs, going up, and possibly a bunch of tariffed goods as well. But so be it. For you and I are counting on each other. We are counting on each other to live and to act in ways that reveal God's love in the world, starting right here and emanating out from here to all the places we collectively touch and influence for love's sake. This is the real meaning of our loyalty. It is the real purpose of the church. May we choose our loyalties wisely. Amen.